name is Tanya Cantlow-Cockfield. I'm the Assistant Counsel to Brooklyn Borough President Eric Adams, and I'd like to welcome you to the Borough Service Cabinet meeting for May 22nd, 2018. Back in February, we had a brainstorming session, and the suggestion was to have the utility companies and contractors come to a Borough Service Cabinet meeting, so that's why you're here today. The first utility company will be Con Ed, followed by National Grid. So I'll just turn it over to you. Oh, right. I got to do the roll call. Sorry. Thanks, Henry. Gerald Esposito. Robert Paris.
Caroline Church-Villanelle.
Okay. Henry Butler.
Present.
Celeste Leon. Present. Melinda Perkins. Jeremy Laufer. Michelle George. Josephine Beckman. Present. Marnie Elias Paya.
Here.
Barry Spitzer.
Here.
Eddie Mark.
Present.
Sean Elise Campbell.
Here.
Laura Single. Viola Green Walker. Sharif Frazier. Dorothy Turano. Okay.
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning, district managers. Thank you for inviting us to your meeting today. We are here to basically explain to you our process as it relates to working with construction in the variety of thoroughfares in Brooklyn. Today I have with me my colleague, Terrence Kelly, who's also from the Brooklyn Corporate Affairs Office. I have Raisa, and she will tell you her last name, who is from our Construction Management Department. And then we have Joseph Brown, also from our Construction Management. And each of us will just make a little presentation on our role in all of this. So our first person will be Raisa, who will just give us a little background on the construction process.
Good morning. My name is Raisa Yarashevskaya, and I am a construction manager in Brooklyn for Con Edison. I just wanted to give you a brief overview of our construction process and how we go about doing the work on the field. And if you have any questions, I'll try to answer them to the best of my ability. So generally, how we do the work is we have multiple departments, engineering, other departments that issue work to us, depending on the needs. New services, let's say burnout streetlights, new streetlights installation, new services for the customers, reinforcement of our system to provide a better service. Based on all that work goes to our planning departments. We have a few groups that plan work for us. So those departments put all the work together and start ordering the permits so we can start the work. The permits will be in order from the Department of Transportation. Typically, if there is no issue or no problem, it takes about 2 to 3 days to order the permit. If we have the jobs that are emergency work, then we order the permit for the same day work. It depends on the needs of the customer and what DOT also deems to be an emergency work for us. Typically, it's when we have no lights to the customer, and that's the major thing that constitutes our emergency. So when the planning group obtains the permit, the job is being sent to us and it's being sent to the contractors that we hire to do our work. And then our process is that the contractors are scheduling they perform their own scheduling. They schedule work based on the goals of us and the PSC goals that are given to us. For example, the street lights are driven by PSC. The summer street lights have to be done within 60 days. The winter street lights have to be done within 90 days. So with that in mind, the contractors will schedule their work. We have a specific contractor that does all street lights in the borough of Brooklyn. All the rest of the work has the different goals. Let's say the new service to the customer takes 45 days. So the contractor also knows that and schedule with that in mind. When they schedule their work, they do it basically by the permit stipulation, parking stipulation, geographic locations, because they're trying to minimize their travel time to be more productive, which also makes sense because we're trying to keep the prices down because it also affects what we charge our customers. Generally, most of our work is done within a day. I would say out of all the bulk of work we have, 80% of our work is done within a day or within a few hours. That's why there is a general topic that we visit with our public affairs, and I am sure you are also involved in that, is notifications to the public. We do not do notifications for work that's being done within a day or within a few hours. It's just physically impossible for us. But if we know that the work is going to commence for about 2 weeks, 3 weeks, longer period of time, we make sure that we notify our public affairs, and they go through all the necessary steps to notify the customers. Additionally, on the typical jobs, we don't close the streets. Our department doesn't. If we need to close it, we usually do it for, let's say, an hour or two at most. The process is, if we have to do that, and this typically goes for the jobs that are, let's say, one lane of traffic only, like a small, narrow street, and the cars are parked on both sides, or we go and crossing the street and we have no other way of positioning our equipment and excavating. Right before we do that, we have to provide notification to the fire department, to a DOT, and to police department. Contractor does those calls in when they know they have to close the street, and they get confirmation numbers from those departments. They also make absolutely sure that they will let people that live on the street get to the street. So they will plate it temporarily so that people can pass and go in. Additionally, we don't typically tow the cars. If we have to do the work, sometimes the car's in our way. It has to be an emergency job that we would do that. And our process is too, we come on no parking days. But if there are cars parked there illegally, what we try to do is we go house to house and ring the bells and trying to ask people to move. We also wait for sometimes, we call our control board and run the place to see if they can probably call people, because we don't have access to neither addresses nor the people's personal information. We try to keep it confidential. And after all those steps exercised, if we have to move the car, we move the car. But again, it's usually only on a typical emergency work when the customers are out of service. Aside of that, we comply with all the permit stipulations we have. I'm sure there are cases when something's happened, but generically we follow the parking steps. We get a permit for material storage, we get a permit for the street closing if we have to, and that's how we do our work. The sidewalk is being restored after we do the work if my department is doing the work, the same day by the contractor. The roadway is either being plated or the asphalt is being brought to grade until the paving contractor comes after that within 10 to 20 days and does that restoration. So this is typically what we do, soup to nuts. And this is where the part of our group ends, and we do, I would say, most of excavations in the borough of Brooklyn. Some of them done by other departments of Con Edison, but we do, I would say, at least 60% of it. Anybody has any questions for me?
First of all, thank you for being here. I think it's really helpful to know your order of operations to help us manage our expectations, so thank you for the description. Just one question that popped in my head when you were speaking is that you said that DOT makes the determination as to whether or not a job is an emergency job, but they tell us that you tell them if it's an emergency job.
No, we tell them, but the problem is there is a difference in understanding, and that's what we go by about a lot of work, because when we order the permit, and if we say this is an emergency work, and DOT doesn't deem it so, they will give us a notice of violation for asking for the emergency permit and non-emergency work. So let's say typical emergency would be considered to be no lights to the customer. But we have situations when we had to go to DOT and explain to them something like street lights. If your streetlights are out of service, you're producing danger to the general public by not having the lights at night. So we got additional permission on a generic level to have emergency permits for all the streetlight work. That happened like a number of years ago, which was not the case before. So this is not your typical no light situation for the customer, but that yet it's something that affects safety for the general public. There are some other cases that we have to go back to DOT and say this is an emergency, and we have to prove that this is an emergency. So it's them and us together, it's not just us.
Thank you.
I heard you say that when you do notifications, you notify the customers.
No, we don't. Public affairs notify the customers only if it's a long-term project. We do not notify the customers on day-to-day jobs.
When it's a long-term project, you said you notify the customers, right?
Yes.
How about community board?
I would let public affairs answer that because it's their
Because
process.
that's notifying the customers is fine, but if we don't know what's going on, then,
When there's a project going on in your community board, there is a work notice that is prepared and should have reached the community board in addition to our elected officials to let them know that this work is being done. I believe some of you may have gotten some of those work notices.
sometimes.
When the projects that, I'm going to go into the guidelines of a work notice and when we will send them after.
And another, when you do emergency work, do you notify anyone?
We typically don't, because the emergency work is usually generated by the customer calling us and telling us that the customer does not have a service.
Okay.
So we typically respond on the same day.
All right?
So the
And
customers know we're
So
coming.
nobody's notified.
Nobody's not, if it's a one-day job, nobody's being notified about it, no.
And why is that?
It's not a part of our process.
Depending on can I go through
Yeah, sure.
after they do their presentation?
Okay.
And then I will go through the plan, emergency, and major projects that we do notice.
Okay, I have a couple of questions. Explain to me, so you said when you have to close off the street, you have to get notification from the permits from DOT.
That's if we know in advance that we're going
you know
to
in
close the street.
advance.
That's like a huge project, which my group typically does not do. Our closeouts are usually like an hour or two, if we have to go like across the street or something. There is a specific...
Oh, so you are allowed to close the streets
Yeah.
without
So the
a
process is,
permit?
if you know in advance, let's say, that you have to close the street for extended period of time, not like an hour or so, but
Right.
like maybe a week or so, then we ask for the street closing permit.
No, I get that, so I'm
That's a
just trying to
different
clarify the difference
Yes.
when you don't have to get
If
a
we don't
permit.
need to get a closing permit, let's say, if it's only like an hour.
Right.
Then we call DOT, we call fire department, we call police department, and we get confirmation number that we called and they're notified for that. And I
Okay.
have like an example of the job with the numbers with me.
You have that?
Yeah.
I would love to see that.
Sure.
Because there have been situations where we'll get calls and people are like, oh, DOT just closed our street off, and, you know, we don't get any
It's not
notifications.
the DOT that's
I
closing.
mean, I'm sorry, Con Ed.
Yeah.
I just closed our street off, so that's why. But you're saying you are so you are notifying NYPD,
Yes.
FDNY, and DOT?
Yeah, that's the procedure.
They're
I'll
notified.
I'll give you the,
Yes.
are there cases when the contractor can sleep or not? I guarantee you they are. Nobody's 100% perfect, but this is the process, and most of the cases.
Who makes the call, the contractor or Con Ed?
The contractor.
Contractor.
The contractor makes the call, because unfortunate reality, we don't have the personnel to follow every crew. Like I have inspector, let's say, they would have 3 crews a day. He will definitely hit every location. Will he be there for 8 hours a day? No.
I'm sure, I feel very comfortable in saying that I'm sure those contractors are not making those calls all the time. I'm sure of that. So is there any follow-up on Con Ed's part, and verifying that the contractors are making those calls to those 3 agencies?
No, there is no verification process. We can
Okay.
put that in place again.
I
But
think y'all
unless-
should. I think if there was follow-up, then I think that will make the contractors do what they're supposed to do. Second thing, one of the major issues when there is work being done by Con Ed or your contractors, 2 things. Especially if it takes more than 1 day, the cleanup situation, and if the space is being left in a safe manner. A lot of times we get calls, Con Ed contractors doing work, they'll leave for the day, the grates are not on, it's not covered up, it's basically, they're leaving unsafe conditions. Who's following up on them on that?
We get a complaint for either our call center, or we get a complaint from DOT or from Public Affairs. There are multiple avenues that we get a complaint, and we send people out to check that, to make sure that they're not.
How soon they come out?
Depending on when we get a call. If I get a call at 7 p.m., I get people next morning, because, again, it's going to cost me, depends on the situation. If it's a safety concern, we call the company forces, they come out. I don't call the contractors. I also have to leverage the financial situation. I'd rather send the crew that's already working to check it out and make it safe, which is the NICA notifications we get. It's a 3-hour response. So the NICA issues us a 3-hour response for everything that's unsafe, based on what they also get from the customers or what they find in the field, and the company forces respond to that. If it's something that can wait until the next day, our contractor comes next day.
Everything you just told me, is that written policy, of Con Ed written policy?
It's my construction practice policy.
So it's your policy?
No, I mean, this is how we operate for years. Some of them is procedural, and some of them is just the general construction practices.
Okay.
Tanya,
Thank
may I-
you.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Josephine Beckman, District Manager of Community Board 10, Bay Ridge, Dyker Heights, and Fort Hamilton. I do have notification questions, but because we're talking about construction, I'll limit my question on construction. You know, Board 10 has seen a lot of construction work, and part of our biggest problem really rests with the contractors not abiding by the stipulations of their permit. And while you may have practices, the charter of the City of New York is very specific as it relates to notification to the boards and the opening of closing of streets in terms of notification to us. And in most instances where a Con Ed contractor, as a in recent, not even anecdotally, very recently, right near my district office, closed the street. I pulled the permit from the DOT website. There are specifications that DOT's OCMC has given on the job to maintain a lane of traffic, spots to be taken, and none of that is abided by. And the easier route is always opted, let's just close the street so we could do what we want. And I want you to realize the impact of closing a street on a medium-density block when you have seniors who have accessory or school children that have to be dropped off. It creates a problem. And I just want to convey to you, maybe it's more of a statement than a question, is that abiding by those stipulation agreements in a very heavily residential district is very important, and notification is very important, because people can make arrangements to change their accessory right appointments, or if they know that there's construction on the job, but we've just seen all too often in Board 10 that those permits are not being abided by, and, you know, closing a street down in a residential district is a big deal, and it has an impact. So notifying police and fire is great, but it has a greater impact on the block. And I have to tell you, from what I've seen as a district manager, I'm not an engineer, is that most of the time it really is for speed and convenience, and not, they're not really abiding by what the permit, you know, states. So I'm sharing that from you from what I see, and it creates a great amount of frustration. As far as notification, I'll ask those, you know, questions later, and also the work sites themselves. If there is multiple days on a job site, keeping the area clean and free of debris is a complaint that we get at our offices, and I could maybe speak for all of my colleagues here. It's simple best practices that, you know, consolidating spaces for equipment, consolidating work debris areas. I mean, and it could be done, and a lot of times it's sloppily done. And our recourse, primarily our contact, is the Department of Transportation's OCMC. And for the thousands of permits that we have in Board 10, and that's magnified by the 18 boards in Brooklyn, we have a handful of inspectors. And I think that's part of the other issue, is that we don't usually get an inspector out as soon as we would like, and sometimes that work is completed. So part of the reason why many of us asked you here today is for us to convey to you some of these issues and problems that maybe you could proactively work with us, and helping to improve those, you know, these recurring issues that we see day to day in our districts.
I live in Brooklyn, so I hear you.
Okay.
My street has been closed by trucks and cars and everything else, and I understand you.
Yeah. When a
But-
street is closed, though, the charter does say notification has to be made to the community board, so maybe that's an item that we have to make with DOT. That becomes part of your notification process. Because if you have an interim notification process, I think an extra call should be made to the boards. It's stated in the charter, and I think that we really need to maybe take a closer look at that.
That's a possibility. We will revisit it with our public affairs as a process issue, because it can't be just in one borough and in one part in one single district. If this is something that affects everybody, that we have to revisit it on the process level, not just on the small level. And as far as, for example, the Bay Ridge is concerned, we just recently had the job that we got a complaint on 82nd Street and 5th Avenue about closing of the streets.
Yeah.
And I checked yesterday, and we made all the proper notifications with all the numbers and everything else.
Well, I'm going to tell you, I was there. I spoke to the contractor at the corner who closed the street. And we had 2 residents who had accessory right appointments, and their vans were not able to get down the street. And I was not notified. When I called DOT, I'm going to tell you that DOT told me that there was no authority to close that street. You may have made the proper notifications. I spoke to the agency, and they're telling me something different. So that's part of the problem, I
I have
think.
numbers for you,
Yeah. No, that's fine.
just in case.
But,
Because
I mean, I have an email from DOT that
I
says
understand
otherwise.
that. So
So
that-
that's part of the problem.
That is part of the problem on our part as well. They've given us certain guidelines that we abide to, and we do what we have to do. And unfortunately, I understand the situation, and we
Right.
will work with you to make it better.
Yeah.
Whatever
And there was
we
no
can.
reason to shut that street. I'm just saying.
I haven't been there,
Yeah.
so
I mean, I have pictures, and it's, what was frustrating is because I really feel strongly that street, a lane could have been maintained there. It's a very busy thoroughfare, medium-density street. And again, you're saying one thing, DOT is telling me something else. That's part of the issue.
I understand you. Unfortunately, if I was there and I would be able to judge the situation, I would be able to provide you better information. At this point, the photographs that I've personally seen,
Yeah.
none of them illustrated the point. So if I can see the photographs, and I can also provide you with numbers, but that's a moot point. The point is that we will try to work with you to make the situation better because we understand your concerns.
No, I
And that is
appreciate that.
Just to add to what Josephine just said, is they're not abiding by the stipulations of the permit. I've yet to arrive at a work site that the crew should have in their possession a permit, which they're required by law to have the permit. They don't have a permit, so how would they know the stipulations if they don't even have the permit? Whenever I arrived, I was like, where's your permit? Oh, well, we're told that we have. What do you mean you're told? Where is your permit? They never even have the permit. So when a crew is there and they're closing a street down, they should at least have the permit to show that they're allowed to close the street down.
Please give me the specific examples, and I'll follow up on the specific
I
examples.
said I've
because-
yet to arrive at a
Well,
work site,
when
so
I
they
arrive-
never have the
I do
permit.
inspect the sites myself,
Mhm.
and I do see the permits. So as I'm saying, I hear you, give me the specific examples, and I follow up. And we display the permit number on the barricades. That's our responsibility to the customers and to the DOT.
Where at? You just where?
The barricades that are surrounding the
okay.
excavation,
Right,
you have
right.
to post the
Right,
sign
right.
with the permit number, expiration of the permit, et cetera.
When you're, excuse me, when you're planning work, since the work is typically single day or a few hours in a day, how hard is it to avoid holidays? Because we have a reoccurring issue where we've had work take place on holidays and on Fridays that we've asked for there not to be work due to events. So I'm just trying to figure out how we can make that better and why that continues to happen really fairly regularly, this past Friday, for instance.
Because you also have to understand that we have the certain PSC timeframes, let's say, to do certain work. We had the snow this year. We had other obstruction this year. We couldn't do the work. We can't just stop our operation. Because I understand the inconvenience on your part that this is a Friday and the holiday, but on the other end, we have to provide a general service. Sometimes it doesn't seem to you like an essential job, but if we're reinforcing the system before the summer, so the air conditions are not going to blow out in the summer, this is essential to us. And it has to be done by specific dates, by our rules and regulations, sometimes by PSC rules and regulations. So there are reasons why we're working, and there are not that many no parking days we also have. We're trying, like, if, for example, if the community tells us these are the specific holidays, we don't want you to work there, like, it just happens in some neighborhoods, we didn't. But we can't always not work because there are specific jobs that have to be done. It depends on the job. And you also have to understand something. Brooklyn has 60% of work of 5 boroughs, excavation works. That goes about the new services for the buildings. About obstructed services, which is the service that exists and burns out, we have 90% of work. Out of 5 boroughs in New York City.
Repeat
has to
that?
be done.
I'm sorry, repeat that again? What was it?
So Brooklyn has 60% of new service work
Oh.
and 90% of obstructed service work out of all boroughs in general. So we have to get it done. Unfortunate reality is we can't work until 9 p.m. every day because our stipulations on the permit, the latest, go until 7 p.m.
But with that 90% what?
Obstructed services, which means that this is the service that exists that burned out.
Okay.
And we have to come there and repair it, so the customer has the service.
So just to make sure I understand, we give National Grid, I'm going to compliment National Grid, a list of major holidays, and typically there's no work on those holidays by National Grid unless something out of the ordinary arises. Are you saying that I couldn't provide that list to you with the same expectation?
You can provide the list to us, and we will do our best to do this, but I cannot judge National Grid work against our work because I don't know what their workload is.
Okay.
I can't answer the same question without that knowledge.
Joseph?
Yeah, so as it relates to construction-related complaints, our protocol has been primarily to contact the New York City Department of Transportation, directly, HICWA,
Okay.
for complaints. Are you suggesting perhaps we don't do that or also include you on that? If we have a complaint about construction, like for example, on my 82nd Street job, they dug up a portion of the crosswalk. Children could not cross the street. It was unkempt. Something like that I would normally write to DOT about. Would you like me to CC you on that? Would you like to know about those issues and problems? Is that something public affairs? I mean, should I be including more than just DOT in this?
It would be helpful
Yeah.
if you can think about where.
And we will try to do our absolute best to respond as fast as possible.
I mean, our goals are to improve
Of course.
the situation. So I want to make sure that we're doing the best that we can.
It's not about us against somebody. We want to work with you to make the situation better.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, so.
Thank you, Reza. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just state your name.
Joseph Brown. So my role in this is regards to the permitting. Once a permit comes together, my aspect is I'm a planner, so I'm looking at different projects that comes forward and try to make sure that how the permits comes out together for the work that has to go forward, so that how the contractor doesn't have a permit to go the intersection, but doesn't have a one to do mid-block, or if there's a couple of permits or a couple of projects going on at the same time, to try to package them as best we can. So if he's coming down the street, just try to make sure that how he is doing house 1, 2, or 3 in the same area as much as possible if there's work that's going forward. So my aspect is to try to make sure that how all the packages go forward. If there's any issues with permitting, for them to respond back to me and ask me or let me follow up in regards to it, so then I can try to reach out to maybe DOT. If it is that how it says the STIPs, the work in STIPs, we try to make sure that how our work minimally, as much as possible, impact both vehicular as well as pedestrian traffic in regards to it. So there are times where it is that how you might see that how the contractor not only has if he's doing a vault in the sidewalk, he not only has an excavation permit, he also sets up pedestrian walkway, so we secure a pedestrian walkway permit, so he has a safe area for the pedestrians to walk in. We also look at the STIPs that he has, and sometimes they'll say to me, based upon the condition of the area, it might be better to get a different working STIPs. So we'll reapply to the DOT, and we pretty much state our case in regards to it, saying because of vehicular traffic, or because of a better area, because of whatever conditions are, it might be better to give us a STIPs. Sometimes they are granted, sometimes they are not. So we try to work as best as we can to try to make sure that how the permitting is in the contractor's hands. The package goes forward, the contractor does get the packages emailed to them. It's in a border package, it goes to them. All the packages, all the permits, all the layouts, all the specs in regards to it, they get. And for me, it's pretty much just working towards making sure that how the contractors have what they need to proceed with the work. If an issue comes up in regards to it, to work towards resolving it as best and as quickly as we can.
Any questions for Joseph?
I do.
Okay, sure.
That was fast and concise. I wonder if you feel like there could be additional measures to ensure contractor accountability. Because just what we were talking about earlier, contractors are supposed to do anything, but there doesn't seem to be a sort of catch to make sure it's getting done. And is that a conversation that you're having in-house? Do you think that some of our concerns maybe indicate some a lack of contractor accountability? It seems to be a problem with, agency-wide, city-wide. So I wonder if it's a conversation.
It's helpful knowing that, helpful in sharing just that concern. We'll take that.
No, I guess, I know they're going to take it back, because obviously the issue here is accountability. And just saying you guys are going to take it back and then propose what? Because what we're proposing is that somehow the community board is involved in this process. And somehow the community board knows exactly what work or what the contractors are allowed to do, and making sure they're abiding by those permits, which at this point right now, the Con Ed, I haven't heard from National Grid yet, but with Con Ed, there doesn't seem to be any accountability on making sure the contractors are abiding by those permits. So what are y'all gonna take back to the higher ups from this meeting?
Just exactly what you are saying, okay? And as Reza had indicated, we do have inspectors that go out. Don't have enough inspectors, obviously, and we will try to stay on top of that, but this is what we can do at this point.
I don't think it's basically beginning to the fire ups as much as taking it to the contractors, to the inspectors, and to the people that go on the field. That's what it starts. We can take it far up, but we need to start from the bottom and make sure that everybody understands your concerns.
So are you telling us then, once you do go back, there are going to be some policy changes, and then you're going to inform us, the district managers, of the policy changes when it comes to accountability from the contractors?
I'm going to enforce the existing rules of the contractors as of right now. As far as the policy changes, it doesn't come to my level. This is something that we have to do, or the fire ups to understand what policy changes can be done to accommodate that. But I can enforce the rules with the contractors now.
So you do have to go to the higher ups for policy change. That's right.
But as far as the general day-to-day process and enforcing the rules that do exist in place, that's something that I can do in my life. And make sure that the contractors understand that the way they operate is visible to other people in the sense that it affects people in more than one way, and they have to make sure that their rules are violated. And that's something in our life.
Okay.
So can I provide an example of a problem at DEP? And so I wonder if there's something similar. Because this was so insightful to me. DEP said one of the problems they have in terms of giving us notice is that they will have a contractor that has one contract, but on that contract there might be 10 locations. And there might be an order in which those locations are supposed to be addressed, but the contractor might go out to location 1, and there might be an issue at location 1, and because they have the same contract to just go to location 2, they may end up doing the work in order of efficiency, which isn't a bad thing, but there's nothing that compels them to let DEP know they're going out of order, so DEP can't, they just don't have a mechanism for tracking the day-to-day locations of a contractor when they're on more than one location within a contract. Is there anything similar that you're?
Yeah, same
Okay.
thing.
They have more than 10 locations today, on any average day.
So there are situations where it is that they might go to location 1, and because of what's going on at location 1, there's sometimes not only just the logistics, the logistics might involve sometimes movies, there might be other things going on. So they go on to location 2. So there is a daily sheet that they put together of scheduling their work, and they might go from location 1 to location 2. So there is accountability, and because of that happens, the inspectors also know the changes in regards to know that how the location 1 is not going to occur today. And sometimes because of locations, and just say because sometimes of parking regulations, they might not get back there because they might put barricades out this week to go to location to be worked today, but then because of that they can't work there. They might not get back to the following week because of the fact of the parking situation. So with that, the customer might say the barricades are out there for a whole week. It was not the intent to not work at that particular day, but because of other factors, it might impact it working on the following week.
We also have situations, let's say we come there, and it's a new service that we provide to the customer, we come, there's a scuffle. We call them before, tell them we come in that day, are you okay removing the scuffle so we can work? Yes, we are okay, we confirm, officers going to be okay, we come there, there's a scuffle. So we leave. We talk to them again, we say, can you remove it today? No, we can't remove it today, so we leave. And that's part of, some of the reasons why we schedule the job and we don't do the job. But I have 6 pages to schedule for the day. 6 pages. Each of them have about, I would say, from 10 to 20 hours. Different contractors, different types of work.
How many contractors y'all work with?
Currently, I have 4. One is covering all the street lights and that's the borough of Brooklyn. And we have 2 contractors that have what we call an area contract. They have a 3-year contract with us to do all kinds of work. One is in east of Brooklyn, one is in west of Brooklyn. And they're separated by Flatbush Avenue, that's the dividing line. And we also have the contractor that does public improvement work. And I don't know if you're familiar with that. It's the projects that we do together with the DOT, the relocation of facilities that the DOT does some kind of project in the area, and then we put apart, National Grid put apart, everybody relocates their facility for whatever reason. That's what we're doing. So that's the country.
So you understand the complexity of just doing the street work here in Brooklyn. And I'm just thankful that Joe and Racer are here to explain it to you, because I can't, and they deal with it every day. So my role, what my role is in all of this is to better communicate these challenges that are occurring in your streets. And one of the things that we are doing is establishing better communication, and it's an ongoing process. And one of the things we are doing is work notices. Now, these work notices we have categorized into 3 sections. Basically, major projects, and these are the projects that would involve the long-term projects that involve multiple internal organizations within Con Edison working together, have significant impacts to surrounding areas, government agency approval, public hearing involved, like anything that's likely to spur media interest, adjacent to sensitive customers, and that and so these are some of the things that I didn't mention, the highly sensitive areas like you know, high traffic areas, commuter hubs, near critical facilities. These are the major projects that are just long-term. So an example of that would be the transmission line construction or repairs. This is a major project. We don't have gas, so I'll leave that to National Grid. But any work that we have to do in advance of any public improvement projects, these are the major, this is that particular category then which we would prepare work notices for. The other is planned work. Now, this is where we are trying to get better. We know that work has to be done, and sometimes we have to just make sure that you are aware of this type of work being done. And in this particular case, it's if the work is going to be more than 2 weeks, for example, and it's deemed a sensitivity type job, a notice should be sent. We're looking at sensitive areas like sensitive customers like hospitals and schools and houses of worship, nursing homes, and even government buildings are considered sensitive customers. And if we know that a street or a lane closure may be greater than 500 feet, which is more than a city block, of course, then we know that we're looking at this as being a part of one of the reasons why we need to prepare that work notice for you. And then, of course, we have the emergency work notice guidelines. This is the unscheduled construction work that's projected to last at least 2 or more days with significant community impact. Once we know about this, this is what we would prepare the work notice. And examples of those would be, of course, street work after an outage or transmission leaks and repairs, an emergency substation transformer outage. Again, so these are reasons why we do the work notices. Now, who gets them? Which is your next question. Our first concern is to let our elected officials know. And we do that through our government relations department. We advise them of that. It was my understanding that community boards were under that category. And you're saying that you do not receive any work notices that are being sent out. Okay. So then we also send work notices out to our customer ops, customer service department, which also sends the notices out to those residents who are in that area who have the My Account, where via email they will do voice robo-calling if they do not have email or text, which is one of our services that we provide through Con Ed. We also let the media know, at least our media relations know, so that the word can also get out. And again, internally within the organization, we also let them know about what work is being done through these work notices. Now, I just have to say, again, this is an ongoing project. We are working with other corporate affairs in the other boroughs to try to streamline and develop a better way to communicate the challenges that we face when it comes to construction in our local streets. So with that, that's how we're trying to do it. And now, all of you, I believe, have a corporate affairs liaison person that you work with, and I understand many of you work very closely with Jahari Jenkins, you got Justin Hahn, Terrence Kelly is our newest member, myself, all working with various community boards. And we just want you to continue to reach out to us when you have these concerns, because we are your best advocates when it comes to work within Con Edison. And we don't mind, it's our job, and it just gives us an opportunity to get to know you and your communities better. So, any questions?
Josephine.
Hi, so I'll get back to my notification issue. So we realize that there are thousands of permits that are filed, and I have to say that the New York City Department of Transportation now does post all of the permits online, so we are able to access those permits. That being said, major jobs or jobs that do impact blocks, advance notice is appreciated. It's also charter mandated. You know, Chapter 86 of the charter specifically indicates that the district manager, the borough president's office, and the district managers must be notified anytime pavement is disturbed within 10 days. And we understand the complexities, and as some of my colleagues here, but on those, you know, larger projects, I mean, certainly we would appreciate that notification, you know, as well. It's important to us. You know, it's interesting, oftentimes our elected officials, we are their first phone calls when the street is dug up. You know, this is what we do. We day to day, we manage our districts, our opening and closing of streets. I could tell you things that are taking place probably on most of the blocks in our district. And a lot of these calls, I believe, could be avoided with some better communication. So working on that with our offices, you know, would be appreciated. And I know that National Grid has really changed in recent years their notification process to us, which has really helped us a lot, especially when work takes place during the summer months and there are lots of events. And as much as the CECM is a great system, it doesn't catch everything. We know what's going on in the districts, and we're able to catch a lot. So I would ask that you do take that back. The other thing is, you know, in terms of notification, is that if there are changes to a job, and notifying residents when work is about to take place. There's the standard rule when you have paving that there's 24 hours notice. And most recently, living through this job right in front of my district office, there was no notice. So we came in the next day, and there was no parking any signs that appeared. I left at 9 o'clock that night, there were no signs, but when I arrived at 8:30 in the morning, there were signs, and you had people kind of scrambling because they just woke up to the signs and how we work on alternate site parking days. So that 24-hour notice, if you could relay back to in terms of when paving or people need to move their cars, that's pretty important in our boards as well.
And thank you for that. And with that, I would just like to say thank you for giving us this opportunity to express our role in all of this. And now it's National Grid's turn, I guess. Ready?
Okay, thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Good morning.
Good morning.
Hi, my name is Terry Yard from National Grid Customer and Community, and I am here with a team of National Grid subject experts to talk about some of the concerns that were mentioned in last meeting. Tanya, thank you again for, facilitating this meeting. I have actually Renee McClure on the line. She is the jurisdictional manager for Brooklyn. She wanted to say a few words. I'm not sure if you can hear her. Unfortunately, there's no conference telephone here, but Renee, you're on speaker.
Maybe you can can you put it up to the mic?
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me?
Put it a little bit closer.
So I apologize, I'm not able to be there in person. I'm actually in Albany attending another session that I could not get out of. But you have a great team with you today to talk about some of the concerns that were brought to our attention. So we have our representatives, as Terry will introduce everyone that's there, but I just wanted to let you know that I am here to assist from this end. And of course, we have our entire team there to assist. So I'm just going to turn it back over to Terry, but I just wanted to know I am on the line to try to address any concerns as well. Thank you, Terry.
Okay, great. Thank you. So as I mentioned, we have a whole team of folks here, and that is a testament to really how important we want to make sure that everyone understands, all of the community boards understand that first, yes, we do have a lot of work that's going on due to the recent rate case. We are trying to do as much work as possible, and we know that it's an inconvenience to the constituents, but it is necessary work. And I know that there were two concerns that were put on the agenda, so I wanted to bring up Sarah Miskunas to discuss those jobs, and she'll explain what's going on. So Sarah.
Thank you, Terry. So I actually have a couple of projects that are going to be going on in District 10 specifically, so I don't know if it's worth speaking about that now or afterwards. Yeah. So I have a job that has about 5,000 feet of gas main replacement that is mandated by the PSC. We're going to be installing this we're going to be starting work in about 2 to 4 weeks. So we are going on 3rd Avenue from Ovington Avenue down to 80th Street, as I mentioned in CB10, and we're going to be transferring all of the gas customers from the old gas main to the new gas main. I'm sorry, that also includes Bennett Court, one of the remaining brick roads in Brooklyn, but we have no intention of actually disturbing the brick roadway.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
That will make my summer a lot easier.
And as mentioned, we can go over details
Yeah, we'll talk
more.
offline. Third Avenue, we have 4 major street events.
Yes.
So
and,
everyone is very nervous. We understand the work has to be done, but the 4 events are just really central to our district. And so the concern right away, once I notified the merchants group, was, is it going to be clean at night, and can we still have our event? So making sure we can coordinate, but we'll talk offline on that.
That's fine. And the DOT permits we get do specify specific embargoes due to the parades and the street events that are going on. So I'm also aware, but we can talk more about the specific dates just to make sure we have them correct.
Great. Thank you.
Yep.
And I must apologize, I did not introduce the team, so let me just first introduce my director, Keith Rooney, who's here. We have Frank Gill, our paving supervisor, on hand. Michael Bob, who's our mandated program manager. Simone Weems, who's the program manager for Local Law 30. You just met Sarah Miskunas. She's our engineer for the jobs that were on the agenda. We have Christina Guelli, who's our government relations team member. And we also have Kyle Costella and Jim Mittenhuber. And we also have Ed Fitzgerald from Howland. So I know that you specifically wanted to have our contractors here. Howland is here to discuss any concerns that you may have. I'd like to bring up Simone Weems. She is the program manager for Local Law 30, which is a mandated program where we are relocating or turn off valves from the inside of the property to the outside of the property. She's just going to give you an overview of what that entails. Thanks.
Good morning.
Morning.
think I've met most of you before at other cabinet meetings or at your community boards. So Local Law 30 is a mandated program by the Department of Buildings that requires all gas services in the New York City territory to have an external shut-off device. The device is primarily used for emergency purposes, which allows first responders to not have to enter a premise in the event of an emergency. So if there's a fire, if there's anything going on in the house, we can secure the gas from outside. In Brooklyn, we have about 19,000 services that we still have to get done, and they're spread evenly throughout all of the community boards. So if we haven't already, we will be touching your community within the next 19 months. The Department of Buildings mandate does require that the program is complete by December of 2019. So we kind of are really under the gun to get this done. We work closely with DOT to make sure that the permits are issued to us that allow us to do our work. It's a short cycle work type of program, so we're not on any block for any extended period of time. Our work takes between 2 and 4 hours, so we're typically on a block and off a block within a week or so. A lot of the appointments, though, a lot of the program and a lot of the appointments are heavily driven by customer accessibility. So we do work with you to gain access to those homes when we can't. And in the event that we can't, we come back to you to advise you of that so that we can secure the gas, and then when the customers are available, we will complete our work. But for the most part, it's a program that's been running since 2014, and again, 19,000 roughly remain in the Brooklyn service territory. Okay?
Maybe this is silly. Is there any coordination between Con Ed is doing smart meters and National Grid is doing Local Law 30, and so customers are going to have to be contacted twice for separate programs? Could there still be an effort to combine and coordinate these installations? It seems like for customer cooperation, it would benefit both utilities, and it would also cut down on the opportunities for fraud, because I know that's a big concern with the smart meter program, that there's already been people out posing as representatives.
I don't see why it's something we couldn't explore, but I have to speak to the team about that.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Simone. So I wanted to have Frank Gill, if he would just come up and just talk a little bit about the new paving process. For those who were here about a year ago, Frank gave an awesome presentation about, the new DOT requirements for paving. So just a brief update on that. Okay, Frank?
Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
As all of you probably know, Department of Transportation brought on new rules recently, about a year ago. Those rules are extending the paving portion of the work. It's taken much longer to do the paving now. Instead of being there one day, it's taking us 5 days, if not more. There's all different steps. There's putting asphalting the opening, digging that up, putting concrete back in the opening, doing saw cutting, coming back, doing a mill and pave possibly, or just putting asphalt back on top. So again, it's taking from 1 day to 5. So that's obviously interrupting a lot of your customers and your constituents. I'm here more for any questions. If you have any questions about paving, I'd be happy to answer them.
Any questions for Frank?
How many contractors, do you have a lot more companies doing paving?
We have mainly one paving contractor. We just brought another one on board. The one that we brought on board is actually to take care of all the local Law 30 work that Simone's doing.
So is New York Paving mostly National Grid, or is that contractor?
New York Paving is a contractor of ours. I'll give you a little brief background on them. Last year they had 240 employees. Now with the new paving rules, they have 369 employees. They invested $13 million in equipment just because of these new rules. So it's huge. They're still not up to where they should be because the demand for the equipment just isn't there. They're still building the trucks. They're still building, everything. So. It's a process.
Hello. I'm wondering if there's any timeline set for that repaving work, because as you mentioned, it's from 1 to 5 days, but in reality, it can take 3-4 weeks, because I understand they have to bring a whole different crew in with different equipment, but does your agency have any sort of guideline that they must complete it within, and are you looking to reduce that in any way?
Yeah, we've been working with the contractor. As I just said, it's a little slow right now. It's about 30 days, okay? Speaking with the contractor, we're looking between more than 15 to 20 days once the job is complete. That's our goal.
My question is regarding how the subcontractors, and this includes New York Paving and Howland, how they work together with National Grid. Specifically when it comes to holiday schedule, sensitive times in the district. Because in my experience, National Grid does a very good job of working with us for sensitive times in the community, but the subcontractors either do not care or they just go and do whatever they want. Because this past Passover, we had worked out a schedule with National Grid, and you were in my office, and I had multiple occasions that both New York Paving and Howland disregarded that. I even went to a site where I was told, I have no idea what you're talking about. And I know for a fact that National Grid did tell the subcontractors certain areas were not to work certain dates. So my question is, how do the subcontractors respond to National Grid? What makes them keep to the agreement National Grid has with the community? And how do we get them to comply with what National Grid is outlining for a certain district in a certain time?
So Barry, yes, we were in your office and we talked about, these stipulations, and we actually have a meeting with Howland and New York Paving quarterly, every 3 months, and we go over, some of the issues. We took that back to that meeting. That was miscommunication on both of our ends. We did send it out, it didn't get to the right people. But yes, we have to do a better job of getting the communication right, and we are working with Howland and we are working with New York Paving to make sure, especially moving forward, that they get those stipulations. So, it's a process and we are continuing to work on it.
And just to add to what Terry's saying, my name's Keith. All 600 of our contractors have just gone through customer sensitivity training, and part of that sensitivity training was, realizing holidays and being aware of that stuff, and also leaving a job site like it's your own house. The contractors have actually done a great job, and I think the key thing is the communication. We're tracking this stuff on a weekly basis. We have a spreadsheet. We track any complaints we get, and we use it as a performance indicator, and they're trending down, which is a good thing. But we have a great partnership with the contractors, and they totally understand. And I apologize for what happened to you. That shouldn't happen ever again.
Well, that was part one. Part two is that, and this personal experience, they sometimes do not have a permit. I went down to a site, they had closed the street, they were doing work, they did not have a permit, and well, the record is there because DOT actually came down and issued them a violation. So how do we keep the contractors like Howland in particular, New York Paving is a little better, but Howland in particular, that they should not do work without a permit? And I've reached out to others, and I'm not the only one who has this problem. They
Understood.
consistently do that.
And the law is that you should have the permit. Not the actual hard copy of the permit, but you could have it digitally also. So we're working with all the contractors to let them know. You can pull the permit up on your tablet or...
No, I'm talking, there was no permit issued by DOT. I was not, they didn't have it. There was no permit issued by DOT. DOT actually came down and had them open the street and close up shop and issued them a violation because they were working without a permit.
More than likely the permit was expired then, that we never had a permit.
So file for a permit.
Absolutely. You're 100% right. We should.
So what policies are in place? If that's the case, it was expired, what policy is in place that they know they're supposed to reapply.
They should be getting back to us and letting us know that the permit is expired, that we need a new permit. That is the policy. And it doesn't happen 100%. Yeah, no.
Yeah, to your point. So part of, we're trying to, that's something we found that's happened on a few occasions. So we're working right now on a permit. It's an automated process. So a few days before the permit expires, it will automatically reorder that. But it's a work in progress. We're in the process of testing.
No, we don't want permits automatically renewed. We want you to go file for one.
No, he said
No, this is an automated system. What he's saying is this is an automated system, and I met with all the commissioners in the DOT last week in Manhattan. And we're streamlining the system so that there's checks and balances, and we're on the same computer system. Right now, Con Edison is actually on the system, and we're in the process of working with our IT to get on this automated system where the DOT can see everything we're doing, and we can see everything the DOT's doing, and that also gives you visibility on the computer system to see what in your neighborhoods. It's a work in progress. We're working on it right now. We're almost there.
And my third thing is that even when there is a permit, they usually do not comply with the stipulations, the same thing that we brought up with Con Edison. Now, I've had numerous times where the permit specifically says you have to leave 11-foot lane open, and they just block the street because it's easier for them. If it says 11 feet for traffic has to be open, 11 feet for traffic has to be open. And if you can't do the work, only if you close the street, then file for a permit that says that you can close the street. If the permit says 11 feet is 11 feet. This happened in my district on 50th Street. I don't know if anybody here knows my district, 50th Street, like smack in the middle of Borough Park. It was during the holiday season, by the way, which is 2 strikes. And it's a bus route, and it's an emergency route as well. And close the street. No permit to close the street. It specifically said it has to be open for traffic. So how do we get and it's usually not National Grid, it's usually the subcontractors that do it. How do we get them to comply with, I don't have the manpower to go out every time, go to a site and say, open the street.
So you're totally right, Barry. They should be following those stipulations, right? We have Howland here. Howland is listening. These are some of the complaints that we have brought to Howland as well. So we, again, have to reiterate with Howland that they have to follow these stipulations. So we're going to go back. We're going to talk with Howland, make sure that they understand that this is something that is abbreviating the community. I would say if you do get that complaint, please forward it over to Renee and myself so that we can look into it right away and get on it.
Okay. But what system is in place? What system is in place now I'm not going to say to babysit the contractor, but
to hold them accountable.
Monitor and hold them accountable to make sure they are done without us constantly having to reach out to you and Renee about whether it's New York Paving or Howland.
So the system is really, if there's a complaint, you have to come to us. Unfortunately, we have thousands of jobs that go on throughout the city. So, if they're not doing something that they should, you have to just reach out to them.
May I ask a question on that? I think what we're asking is what internal system is in place that would provide incentives to do things the right way versus the wrong way. I think we all kind of said they close the streets because it's easier, and doing a risk-benefit analysis, if it's easier and all you're risking is a stern talking to from Renee McClure, I mean, that might not be pleasant because I know Renee can get down on it, but if that's the only penalty, there's no contractor penalty. There's probably incentive to get the job done, and no disincentive to not do it the most expedient way.
And just to add to what Sean just said, I gather, I may be wrong, that if they do get a violation, it's on National Grid, it's not on them.
No, that's not true. The contractors pay their own violations.
They do?
Yes.
What's your, the length of the contract with Allen in New York Paving? Like 4, 5, 6 years? How long is the contract?
3 years left.
3 years left. Are y'all required to be able to only have 1 or 2 contractors at a time?
Well, right now, Hallen is our main service contractor. They're our biggest contractor. Simone has, what, 7 now?
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
Okay. So when the contract is up, then is there a bidding process?
Yes.
My name is Eddie Mark, and I'm down in Coney Island in CB13. And just recently, or about a month ago, one of the neighbors didn't get a notification for they were coming to her house to close off the gas and doing work on her block. The notification came less than 12 hours, and she wasn't there to make any appropriations for the contractor, and then it took a whole week, as Terry knows, to turn back on the gas. I mean, those type of things, this isn't the first time, and I'm sure it's not going to be the last time. And it's just more of just courtesy for the customer to get things that we know that, like you said, you have to get things done, but it's just more than 12 hours, more than 24 hours. I mean, it's just something that needs to be looked at.
So Eddie, on that particular job,
Yes.
we researched that, and we had made multiple attempts to get into the customer's home. She would not give us access. So that was the...
Okay, but for me in general too, I had less than 12 hours on Thanksgiving week, and they came into my driveway and told me that I had to get my car out. And I said to them, why? And they said, well, we have to do this. And they didn't give us any notice. They told me, they knocked on the door that morning and told us we had to get the car out.
Was it an emergency?
No, it wasn't an emergency. They did everything on the block. They just came down that block, tore it up, and we had to, abide by it. It's not that we didn't want to. It's just more if you gave us courtesy to let us know. I think something like that was just helpful.
I've been on emails with Renee with a lot of customer notification of work that's being done. We send out notifications practically every day regarding either local law 30 or maintenance, or if there's emergency work that's going on. So I know that we're sending out notifications. If we miss 1 or 2, I apologize, but on the regular, you get notifications within, I would say, a week of the job being done.
There's also one thing is the workmanship of Hallen. We have some problems with when they repaved the sidewalk. It cracked. It disintegrated. I seen blocks where they complained to me, and I told them complain 301, and the stuff, and yet nothing has been done. It is within the last 2 years, and it wasn't because of the salt or the winter time. It just disintegrated within 2 months. 2 months, 3 months, and they showed it to me. I looked at it, I'm like, and you can tell this was just recently put in, and there hasn't been anything done since then. And this is all over Coney Island. It's not just 1 or 2 blocks. It's all over Coney Island. And I can point them out, but like I said, I don't have time to go to each block, list them, and see. They have to go. Someone has to go back and look at it, because 3 years from now they're gonna say, "Oh, you should have called us 6 months ago," and yet nothing has happened. So something like that has to quality checks on them, because I've seen it. I've seen it with my own eyes, and it doesn't look good. It doesn't look good.
So I know you had a meeting with government relations as well as Renee regarding some of those issues. Frank is the paving supervisor here. If there is an issue where there's cracked sidewalk, send us an email. We'll have an inspector go out and take a look at it, and if it's National Grid, we'll definitely fix it.
All right.
You acknowledged that I asked a question, but I didn't discern an effort to answer it in terms of incentives to do the job the right way in the first place, rather than...
So we have no incentives. We generally are, as I mentioned before, we meet with Hallen. We express the concerns that we receive, and we continuously, try to improve on those problem areas, but there are no incentives per se. We just continue to, listen, we know we can do better, right? We can always do better, and that's what we're doing with Holland, with New York Paving, by coming in every 3 months. We used to do it monthly, now we're doing it quarterly because of scheduling. But we continue to work with our contractors to make sure that they're doing the right thing, speaking to our customers correctly, making sure that they leave the work site the way that they found it. But as to incentives, no.
There should be some penalty, no, if they have been operating in a community in a way that isn't by the rules.
So you asked me a question, I'm telling you there's no penalty, we have no penalty, we continue to work with our contractors.
I have one, hopefully just a suggestion for you. It just came up in our district this week, and I wanted to bring it to your attention. We had a restaurant that paid their bill online, and I believe it sounded like it was a little late payment, but they paid the bill online, and the following day, the service technician came and shut the gas off at the restaurant. So it was about 11:30 in the afternoons. They were already fully staffed and preparing for the day, and the technician said there was nothing they could do to not shut off. They had to shut off the gas that day, and they said that the owner of the business should have called the agency when making that payment online, and that would have prevented the technician from coming and shutting the service. It was restored about 5 o'clock, but they lost, the wages and the amount of sales they would have gotten. So just a suggestion to maybe put, if that is in fact a policy, to put a notice right on the bill paying website to say, if you're paying this late or however it works.
Take a look at that account, because coming from a customer service background, I know that there are like 3 or 4 notices that are sent out regarding, a past due notice on
Sure.
So if it's the last chance where it's like, you're gonna get a specific date as to when we're coming out to turn the gas off, within 7 days, within 5 days. But if they make a payment online and the customer knows that it's a past due balance and it's really past due, before we would go out and turn off a non-residential property, not to mention a residential, but a business, they would generally have to contact the call center and let them know that they're making a payment. It's not just a 30-day past due. For us to turn the service off, you're talking about 90 days probably.
And like I said, I'm not sure of the details, but just something on the website right there saying, to call the agency just to avoid service interruptions for businesses that are relying on that.
I'll definitely take that back. I'll definitely take that back. Thank you.
I have one more question. We met last week in an interagency meeting with DOT, EDC, and DDC, and National Grid was there, Christine was there, and Renee was there also. And there was one concern about working before 9 a.m. In the morning. And based on that, it was because school kids had to get to school before 9 o'clock. The buses couldn't get there, so the EDC and DDC said that they weren't going to have any construction happening before 9 a.m. Come Friday, they were working there. They got fined by DOT, which was good. Then they said they'll start on Monday, that they won't be doing it. Come Monday, which was yesterday, 7:15, they started again. I called EDC, I called DDC. They said it wasn't them. They said it was National Grid. Can you guys verify something like that? Because they threw you guys under the bus. Yeah, because something like this, I said, reading your stipulation, it said you guys don't start until 10 a.m. But they said that they didn't have anybody on their site working at that time. So just letting you know. Yes, I will send that to you.
Send it to me and CC Christine.
Yes.
Thanks. Take a look.
We have Helen here, right? Okay, so I guess we'd like to hear from Helen if they actually have a system where a crew that doesn't do things the proper way, if there's any repercussions within the company of Helen.
Yes, we've been in the last 2 years.
Can you stand up, please?
Good afternoon. Ed Fitzgerald from Howard Construction. We do have so it's still good morning. Ed Fitzgerald from Howard Construction, and appreciate you giving us a few minutes so then we can explain to you a little bit of what we do internally to monitor our employees. As Frank alluded to a little while ago, the growth on the New York paving side, Howland Construction has seen that same type of growth. In the last 5 years, we probably went from somewhere around 200, 250 union employees to almost 800 this year, all right? And that's been driven a lot on the work that's coming from the PSC, it's mandated work. Obviously, with that, when you have that kind of growth, we will have challenges trying to monitor all that growth. So if you go from an average around, say 30 crews, 40 crews at your height, down to 10, 15 in the wintertime. I mean, if we had 10 or 15 crews out there in January and February, you probably wouldn't even know we were out on the streets. The work has changed a lot in the last 4 to 5 years. That's not the case anymore. I believe just this past January, February, even with all the weather situations and conditions we were dealing with, we still had 80-something crews working for National Grid at that time, which then tends to lead to some challenges when we get to the warmer weather with the restoration. All right. As Frank had brought up, last year there were some major changes that were made with that restoration phase. It's taken us the better part of a calendar year to develop all the resources, get them in, get the crews so we can get this work done in a timely manner. I'm sure you're tired of hearing of the fact that now instead of being 1 day, it takes us 3 or 4 or 5 days. At some point that story gets old, you don't want to hear it anymore. You're looking for results, and we respect that. I think we're a lot closer to getting to that 15 to day 20 period now. Once again, weather has a lot to do with it. Internally, we track our employees. As far as accountability with their violations, yes, we're accountable. I get a log once a week that's emailed to me, and I have to go in and justify the locations of what we feel we're accountable or not. And this is over 7 figures a year that we're accountable. So it's an issue, or it's a topic for us that we are absolutely looking to address. We also, we track qualifications, we track the customer complaints. Part of the database that we built, something called, is the module that we call it CVAC. It's complaints, violations, and CARs. So we track this information coming in. We're able to go back by the location, track who the foreman on location was. There's a time card that every foreman has to make out on the system. So, and we use pay item units to identify the locations or the scope of the work. So we can go back to any date, any location, find out who the foreman was, who else was on that site. There's what we call a job brief that's filled out before the site starts. Anybody who visits that site during the day has to sign that job brief, or we're not in compliance. So that allows us to track where all our employees are at all times. Get an idea when they start, when they're finishing. Sometimes you're right, they are working out of the scope of work or the steps. And sometimes it is a communication that they don't have the permit on site, or a new foreman doesn't realize that he can go to his tablet, that there's a module there, he can look, check the permits, and see that they're still valid. So there's a lot of education that goes on. But it's one of the challenges that come with the fact that we are developing an internal database ourselves, because we saw the need of this growth that was going on, and at the same time continuously adding resources that not only do we have to train on the gas end to be qualified to do this work, to keep the public safe, but at the same time train them on our own internal database, that it's just not a paper form anymore. You fill it out and you hand it in 3 days later. So it's taken, it's been quite a challenge on our end, and we've had some struggles with it. We're not gonna hide those. We are continuously bringing in the resources. I talked about what we're doing in the field management side. We went from about 30 to 35 full-time employees. We're almost at 80 now. So we can manage this work. It's just not managing the work that's going on in the field, but it's managing your concerns. It's one of the reasons why I came here today. I didn't think I'd be speaking. I figured I'd come with my ears, not my mouth, and I would listen, and then go back to my supervisors, go back to my IT group, look at things that we were doing maybe in our database that maybe we can improve on, go back to my foreman, and hopefully start to create a better relationship. Take your concerns firsthand. I'm hearing it now, all right? And go back to our field forces and see where we can improve. Like I said, we track the customer complaints on our foreman, we track the violations that are on site, we track if there's an SOP violation with these individuals, so they don't get off scot-free. We do look at the history of the individual. Sometimes some people just have a bad day, and their history shows that this is not their normal behavior, all right? But we'll track whether we've had an individual, possibly maybe there was a damaged water service or an electrical service that they didn't hand dig through the town zone. Then we get a complaint that 3 days later, that same individual is closing down a street. We'll bring that individual and we'll sit down and talk with them. The next incident could be one of three things that would happen to that individual. It could be a day suspension. It could be loss of weekend privileges. They could lose their driving privileges, or we get to a point where we don't feel that the individual understands all the needs and concerns of not just getting the job done, but understanding where you're working. Understanding that if this was in front of your home, your mom's house, a relative, would you leave the site like that? Would you do that? In most cases, I think the answer would be no. Because if the answer is yes, that individual is gone. We don't want them in our workforce anymore. So we do hold them accountable. People get suspended, we've let people go. And I'll let you, with the size of the force that we have, it's taking some time to make sure we can have all the resources in place, all the checks and balances in place, so that now we can become more efficient and minimize these complaints.
Yeah, I'm Caroline Church from Community Board 2, which is downtown Brooklyn, Fort
Mm-hmm.
Clinton Hill area. So our problem isn't so much notification, either for National Grid or Connect. I must say, I believe we get notified. And of course, most of this is complaint driven, so we're not getting a lot of complaints about that. However, our issue is really with maintenance of the site and completing the site after the job is done. Mm-hmm. So we get sites that just sit there for extended period of time, and I'm not talking about the 20 to 30 days in which we can give for repaving. I'm just speaking about it sitting there for months at end. And I've addressed this with our reps, so I don't really want to bring up the sites again, but the thing that I still haven't understood is there a system whereby when a complaint goes into the system, it's followed up on? Because we've filed multiple complaints on behalf, through the system, and the site just sits there for an extended period of time. We had one that was almost 8 months. There was no work being done for 8 months.
And material was sitting out there?
There was no material. It was just the excavation work was done. Oh yeah. We got it done. But I'm just saying that it doesn't seem to be a way in which some of these complaints are followed up on. Because maybe the crew says, oh, that job is complete, but the paving was never done, the barricades weren't removed, the cones are still sitting there, and it presents a hazard to the public.
If it's a delayed job, I think that'd be a communication with Nat Grid and the engineering group. We do have weekly calls with them, and sometimes crews do get pulled out of locations. You may have a prior paving location going on in another area that we need to get in there because the city may have another roadway. That's just one example. But if it's material, barricades left behind, restoration, I believe when we come to do service work, we have to hand a notification to the homeowner that we need to gain access to the house. There's a HAL number on that notification. When they call it this complaint, they call the HAL office. All the clerks are trained. They will take down the complaint, the homeowner's name and number, and we put it into what I call that CFAC system. And it's given an identification. The customer waits online, it's only about 30 seconds to a minute. We can give you back that number. So a week later, if it fell through the cracks and we didn't address something, you can call with that number, and then we can look it right up in our system. Every morning, clerk goes in, sees all the new CVACs that came out, they get printed out. We will check the history of the job, whether it's through our systems or through in that grid, you see where the status is, where the pavement has been, is it ready, okay, has it been entered, pull all that data, and then we took one of our pavement clerks last year and dedicated completely to just handling these complaints. Going out, making a phone call, talking to the customer, meeting, or just going out to the site, maybe it's just some general cleanliness that needs to be done. So we are doing that. We are right now in the midst of hiring another individual to go out and take care of what our service locations. These are growth services, this would be local authority, and the services that go on to the projects that Sarah had mentioned, and the transfer services. And his work, what we're going to do is we're going to train him for about 2 weeks on how Howland operates, gas qualifications, and compliance, community board and DOT. After that 2 weeks is up, his job is going to be just to go out, see the crew, take an overview of what's going on with the crew, and just make sure all these areas are being addressed on a daily basis. So instead of having an inspector that has, say, 10 locations a day to hit, and he's going to move in and out of the location, say, in 15, 20 minutes, because he's got to get here, here, and here. He's on a tight schedule, traffic is difficult. We'll have someone that doesn't have those concerns. His job, or her job, is just going out there and making sure from A to Z that we're in compliance. So this is not something that National Grid is going to pay us to do this. This is a need that we see that with the growth and with the concerns and complaints that we're getting, and that we need to respond to them in a timely manner. And you need to know that we are. That we're going to bring on another employee just to handle that.
I had a question. So how do the complaints get to you? Do they go directly to you or to National Grid, then to you?
Well, some come through National Grid and through emails, but we have customers calling our main office through that notification. And when we get those calls, we're able to track them in our database.
So there are two mechanisms, either to go directly to you or to National Grid, then to. Okay.
So just to follow up, since we don't go directly to Howland, we go through National Grid. You said before you track complaints. You track our complaints that go into National Grid?
Yes. If we get an email or there's a chain or a phone call that's made to us, they will go into what that CVAC module that I had mentioned as well. Yes.
That's encouraging, thanks.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions?
So I just wanted to thank everyone for being here today, thank my team. We have a whole team here. So thank you very much for taking time out of your busy days to be here. Just wanted you to know that this is so important to us, to get the communication right, and to make sure that our constituents are, that we're leaving those work sites in the same manner that we actually came and saw it. So it's continued work. We're going to continue to plow at it, and we're going to get better at it. So thank you very much.
Thank you again, actually. And I know Con Ed, they're gone, but thanks to Con Ed and to National Grid for taking the time to be with us today. I know, I'm hoping that this was helpful to the district managers and to the community. So thanks again.
Thank you so much. Finally, nice to meet you. See you on all the emails. Eddie, make sure you send the email, okay?
Bring it up under all
Thank you
business.
so much, so helpful. Appreciate it so much.
Putting it together.
Take care. Oh, you want some water? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
Are you Are you now going to speak about OCMC?
Well,